I'm talking about some names of Bengali cinematographers who have been ignored. তার মধ্যে কয়েকটা নাম is obviously দীনেন গুপ্ত, শক্তি বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায়, অজয় কর, কানাই দে, who have been doing stupendous work at that point of time, but have been largely ignored. Because I think what had happened at that point of time is যে মানে এখনো যেটা হয়েছিল তারপর অনেকটা টাইম অবধি যে technicians behind the camera were never really spoken about per se, because it was always thought to be something that the audience doesn't need to know about. তার জন্যে the main important thing the technicians were highlighted were majorly obviously the actor and actresses, the director and the music director. তার বাইরে who is editing, who's doing the camera, who's doing the art design never really came into the forefront. The whole thing bursted out of proportion and came into the forefront was maybe when Satyajit happened. Satyajit burst into the Bengali scene with a Panchali, with a new team and a new director, and everything was done independently. And suddenly people stood up and started to take notice about how a film gets made. And that is when, obviously, with all the amazing things that he has done, Subrata Mitra came into the forefront. And I think he was one of the first DOPs to have that recognition of how to make a film look beautiful and what goes behind the camera. But prior to that, it was all just about box office collections and good films. Uttam Kumar film is coming out, or a Soumitra Chattopadhyay film is coming out, and it is directed by such and such person, and how it is great and what story it has come from, কতদিন এই হলে চললে, it is a visually or is it a star or whatever. That was the whole scenario about it. And in that process we kind of missed and stopped talking about a lot of DOPs who have been working in the Bengali industry prior to that and who have been doing amazing work. When we are studying about the history of cinematography in Indian cinema per se, we are talking about V.K. Murthy working in the Hindi film industry and not others, and their technical inventions of this, that and everything. But we have never really spoken about the cinematographers who have been working in Kolkata, who are doing equally, if not better work in visual storytelling, in amazing visual representation of the story, and they have been largely ignored. Which I think now in hindsight, when we study about our films and our culture and we look back into their work, it comes into the forefront of what they have already done. If you're talking about a film like Saptapadi, if you're talking like a film like Amarjin Abdullah, if you're talking like something about Deyaneya, Thoginiya, Dadar Kirti, these have been films which have been done by various of these DOPs throughout the ages, and each have their own different work. They have their own different styles, and all of them are amazingly appropriate to the story that is being told. So in Amarjin Abdullah, you are basically dealing with a situation which is a make-believe, it's a fantasy film. You have sets, you have real crew, you have costumes, you have song and dance, and you're using monochrome to do that. And it does splendidly because you still have that feeling of amazement and phantasmagoria, that suddenly these four dacoits are bursting out of nowhere, and you feel that. In the same way, if you see something like a Saptapadi, it is an amazing camera work, because the first few scenes where Uttam Kumar finally sees Suchitra Sen after all these years, there is this long track shot where he comes out from where he has just attended her and goes to his own room. It is, I think, almost a 1.5 minute of a long track shot. And you will see the superstar of that point of time, Uttam Kumar, walking through pitch dark. You just see his silhouette and he's walking, and it's such a slow camera movement. It's like poetry. But that is a path-breaking kind of a shot design that we try to do today. Today sounds very modern, and it is like, oh, isne kuch alag kiya hai, or something different has been done. But no, it is a shot taking we are seeing in a out and out commercial film, which is one of the biggest commercial films our industry has ever produced. And you have shots like that. You have shots of backlit and in smoke throughout this film, and it is amazing to watch that. So yes, we have been having technical innovations in the cinematography department in our industry for the longest time, but yes, maybe they have gone back or have got lost in the history of filmmaking per se, and it has also had to do a lot majorly because of that simple demarcation of being a commercial film and an art film, which was very apparent at that point of time even. So I think the audience never really wanted to know, and it was never really spoken about, and by the time it was starting to be spoken about, the demarcation was already there, that you speak about the technical innovations of a certain type of cinema and not for a certain type of cinema, and hence certain people like them have gone into the oblivions of history, which is really unfortunate. But if you now look back and revisit these films, you will really understand the amazingness of the beauty in all of these shots, and they're so modern even now. I think, and I personally believe it very strongly, that DOPs shouldn't really have a signature uh, in their own work, because honestly, all films and all stories are different from each other. If we try to mold them in a similar pattern of visual storytelling, we kind of lose the core essence of the story we are trying to say. Because if A, B, and C are telling the same story to you, they won't be telling in the same manner. Everybody will have their own perks of saying. Somebody would highlight a certain way, somebody would say it in a certain way. And more in the same manner, the DOPs that are supposed to work are supposed to tell the story in their manner for that story itself. And when we're talking about all these DOPs previously, if you see them, some of them have done something like a Saptapadi or something like a Deyanaya, something like a Shamoli, and have later on done something like a Chotabo, or they have done something like a Dadar Kirti. So if you see their work also, you realize that they have never really struck up on one way of visual designing or one way of visual storytelling, which is important and which is how it should be. Because the moment you stuck your story in a storytelling in a certain way, then it becomes your story, the DOP's story, the DOP's point of view, and that is really not what we are here to do. We are technicians who helps our director to tell his story, to tell his vision, and maybe transcend it, or maybe help him tell the story in a better way. So if in that way we try to put our own perks or our own thought processes behind it, I think it kind of uh, dilutes the storytelling of the director himself. So if you look at all of their work previously, you won't see that there is a homogeneity in the filmmaking process or in the image making process. Obviously, when you're doing something like monochrome, because of the emulsion that point of time, because of the technical uh, what do you say, the technical advancement that has happened at that point of time, you needed to shoot in a certain manner so as to give you a certain kind of image quality for the emulsions, for how the exposure it is, for how the lights that were there. But if you see their work, none of them are quite similar to each other, because they have been following their own stories, they have been following what was important for the story at that point of time, and they have delivered accordingly. Obviously, in all of this, somebody might like to shoot in backlights more, somebody would like to shoot in soft focuses more, somebody would like to shoot in half lights more. But except for these certain personal likes and dislikes, you won't see that there is a very similar pattern in how they have been shooting films for decades. And that is something I feel is very important, because that is why you have got, and we have got, such a plethora of different visuals and images in the commercial Bengali scenario. Because if all the films actually looked similar, it wouldn't have excited the audience to revisit the other film or go to the other film to see a new film. It is just not about, Uttam Kumar or Soumitra Chattopadhyay or somebody else. It is about how Uttam Kumar is looking different from a Deyanaya to a Saptapadi to something like a Shamoli. These differences make the scenario. So when you're having a Dhyanya, it is more of an indoor drama. You have very few outdoors in it. Again, in the same time, when we're looking at Saptapadi has a generational gap, it has a time lapse, it has a village and a Kolkata mixed together. When you're looking at Shamoli, there is a female protagonist who is more important, and you have indoors, you have outdoors, you have hospitals, and everything else. And all of them needs to look different. And again, if you're looking at something like a Devi Chaudhurani, or you're looking at like a Dadar Kirti, Dada Kitty is a colored film and it looks completely different from his previous films. You are trying to capture the essence of a place like Shimultola in color, which is glorious in its way. So yes, I believe that, if we look back into all of this cinematography, is something really to learn, that they have really broken the boundaries of having a signature. They have just delivered on the story, yet have had their own sense of understanding of the image design, of the visual poetry, of the visual politics, if I must say. And they have created stories which themselves are individualistic, yet still are so relevant even after 20, 30, 40 years of being made, and we're still talking about it. And I think that is the biggest win for a cinematographer, that after 40 years or so, you're still talking about their work, and it's still relevant and it's still modern in today's context also. So when we are cinematographers, I think there are two shots that is of the cinematographer. Okay. One is the first shot of the film, and the second is the last shot of the film. Because on the first shot, you don't have any baggages towards the audience to tell a story in a certain fact or a certain way. You're literally introducing the DOP to a new geography, to a new cast, to a new place, to a new scenario, to a new world, and you still not into the bound script anymore. You are just getting into the story. So the first shot is of the DOPs and the last shot of the DOPs, because this audience now already knows the story. They have had the journey, and you have no more baggage to tell a story in a certain way, and you can finish it off in your way. In between that, you have to understand that whatever understanding I have, however great a technician I am, my primary job is to have an information conveyed correctly to the audience. It is not even my vision, it is not even my story. It is a third person story, a third person visual that I am interpreting and giving it to the audience. I am like an interpreter. He is talking in English and you understand the German, and I am the person who can speak both the languages. So it is my duty to understand what he's saying, translate it into an understandable language of the audience, and tell it to you so that you understand exactly what he has been thinking. So I am bound between a third person's thought process, a third person's written text, and thought processes. I am with a bound script. The word is very important. I'm in a bound script. There is not too much of, how do I say, philosophy or technical jargon that I can really speak, because it is not my story. I have two shots, those are mine, the first and the last. Because at that point of time, I don't have a baggage to tell the audience what is after and what is before. The moment I go to the second shot, I've got into the story. It is not my narrative anymore, it is somebody else's narrative. So I am a technician first, a craftsman second, a translator third. Uske baad, if something is left within me, then I am an artist who is in between. See, it is very, you have seen temples, right? You have seen temple carvings, right? They were telling about the adventures and the stories of the kings. You have to carve that out in and out just the way it is. But do I make a Khajuraho out of it or do I make a Ajanta out of it? That is mine. But the story is the certain person. That is the narrative of the king. I cannot change that. I would say I had shot this film called Watchmaker. It was directed by Anindapula Chatterjee. It was a very different film in the sense that it was a film that he termed as a no rule film, okay, or a nonsense film. And what had happened is that I had used only tungsten lights without any diffusion, without any of the paraphernalia that a certain DOP uses. And I had taken huge inspiration from German Expressionism and had shot according to that. So they had hard shadows and stark highlights. The heroine was shot in completely flat lights and yet making a sense out of it. We shot it in one stadium only, so one stadium room. So there was the art design was also abstract. It was an abstractist film, but I tried to make a sense out of it. I personally love how it had turned out, but because how the film was, it was very difficult for people to really understand. It was, I think, mm too much of a as we call abstractism into it, too much of expressionism into it, which was very difficult for people to grasp, and it didn't really reach the places where I would have loved it to reach. But I think it is personally one of my most experimental, most daring works, if I must say, that I had done, and I'm superbly proud of it. Though it is in Dhaka University, part of the curriculum under image making processes in modern cinema. But yes, I would have loved if it would have reached more people and it was spoken about, because it was something that I really tried to break rules of and did something very differently. But some things don't happen the way you plan and you have to accept it and move on, I guess. I don't know about the advantage or disadvantage, because if I am such a person, I don't ever carry myself, I don't believe in the fact that it's a female or a male working in a scenario. Okay, I just try to put my work in the forefront and I work accordingly. Initially, I must say that initially there was a bit of skepticism when I used to approach directors, or directors used to put me in their rosters of, who's my DOP and stuff like that. That is was the time when really the questions were starting to get asked, that who is she, can she do this, or does a female have the tenacity to pull off a, it started the lines between a physical ability to pull off a 20-day shoot and a 22-hour shoot became blurred with the fact that how good am I at my craft. Both are not the same thing. You're one talking about my fitness and one you're talking about my skills. But it kind of started getting blurred in between, and that is what I think happens everywhere. And I've slowly and gradually realized that it's just not about me functioning in this industry. It is, I think, women per se face everywhere. And after a point, what I did, I stopped responding to questions like this. I stopped reacting to questions and answers like this, because I knew that I needed to reach the set, because what I can do in the set, I know. The person who's judging me doesn't know. He hasn't not seen my work even most of the time. So I stopped thinking about it. I stopped negating it. I stopped giving importance to it. I started negating it. And slowly and gradually what happened, like my 4 years of being in the industry, or 4 and 5 odd years of being in the industry, I'm not that old in the industry, honestly. What has happened, that now that question of me being a female or a non-female has stopped being asked. Now it has become that, will Modhura would like to do our film, is she interested in the script, or worst case scenario, will she be able to pull off something like a period or something like a thriller or something like that. So they have now started questioning my skill, which I am still okay for. But you're questioning a gender or an identity which I really have nothing to do. Well, being the woman is the only thing in my whole existence where I haven't had a decision to make. It was given, and I didn't do anything about it. So, if you're judging me on a certain aspect which I don't have any control about, or I am not the decision maker, I really don't have anything to say about it. But having said that, what I believe that, though as much as I want to negate the fact that they stop looking at me as a woman, there are certain facts and facets that the industry also needs to kind of get sensitized to. If I'm a woman working in the industry, I will have 5 days in a month where I'm at my weakest point. And those 5 days on set for me is hell. And I try to, but I might falter, I would have mood swings, I might suddenly shout at my assistant, I would want to sleep, I feel very tired easily. A 22 hour schedule feels very difficult for me at that point of time. That is physiological. No matter how much I try to negate it, that will come. And they have to understand, if I'm a woman, if I'm shooting outdoors, you have to have a washroom for me. I cannot help it. I cannot go to the field. I will have to. I have been to fields going to the toilet, because obviously there is only me, the woman in the unit, and nobody has thought about that where I will go if I need to go to the washroom. And there hasn't been any system, because nobody thought about it, obviously. So I had to literally had to go to the field, and my assistants were very kind of it. They would literally come with black cloth and hold it around me, and they're all men, okay? So they would all come and hold a black cloth, and I would pee in the middle of the field and everything. I had to come back. And if I had no place to go, so there will be 20 hours, 22 hours, I'm not going to the washroom. So, the fact, what I'm trying to say is that don't judge a gender and discriminate by the skill. Understand that if I have a certain gender, that person would have certain hygienical and physiological needs. You ask me to put the camera on my shoulder and run 20 miles, I will do that. That is not a problem. But at the end of it, I need to go to the washroom, or I would need to have my sanitary napkins in place. So have that in, thought process of what a woman technician is on a set is very disturbed and very redundant if you look in that way. But there's also an amazing thing to it, that I try to negate or ungender my job, but as much as I want to do that, I realize that seeing me working in whatever little capacity that I do, I have realized that a lot of other girls kind of get excited by it. And they think, oh, okay, so Modhura is doing something like that, we might just be able to do it. So there are so many shades to it, that we, on the other hand, who are working in the industry, we're trying to negate and not talk about this term as a women cinematographer, but seeing us in a certain behind the camera, with a shoot and looking all sweaty and muddy and not looking glamorous at all, is glamorous for a certain girl from, say, Medinapur, and she wants to be there. So I really don't know if it has an advantage or disadvantage, but I think we walk through a lot of different scapes and cycles of walking with this gender in an industry, and it is both sides of the coin, because you want to be a woman, you don't want to be a woman at the same point of time. You want, because people come and tell you, we want a female DOP, and you ask why, because they want a female perspective to the script, and I really don't know what it means, but yes, they want a female perspective, because we think that women would look at a male body or a female body in a very different way than a certain male would. So that is also there. Yes, it is a roller coaster ride of things, and everybody has their own take and understanding of weirdly a gender that you really don't have any control about, and you're functioning within it, and yet keeping your sanity in place, your femininity in place, and yet trying to say that I'm not feminine, I'm a very hardworking thug life kind of a person. So yes, it's a very gray area. I think the only advantage of a film school training is it's like an elevator. Okay, somebody who's not from a film school have to climb the first 4 stories of the building by stairs. The film school will take the elevator and reach that 5th floor faster. But honestly, after the 5th floor is the same journey. Then there is no difference. But it just gives you that initial advantage of rising a bit quicker. Because what happens in film school, we are studying and we are reading about the logistical of a film unit, of how to do films very technically very earlier on. So after film school, you don't really have the need to assist anybody or you learn from the job, because you've already done all of that. You know the cameras, you know the technicalities, you know how to have an image making process. It is just about the experience, like first hand. But you have already had all of that. But if you're actually not from a film school, it doesn't really matter. The initial steps might be a bit of a hiccup for you, but after that we're all going to be in a level playground. So the only difference is, by the time when you reach 5th floor, I am on the 10th. But if you are good enough, you will reach me on the 10th. I'll be still stuck on the 10th and I cannot move forward, because your skill and your understanding is the long term helper to you in your film career. But film school is really not that. It just gives you that initial understanding of what is a real life set can be, how to handle equipment, to understand equipment, to understand the technological know-how firsthand. It is just going into an engineering school. Somebody who has an acumen for engineering would read different books and know how to make a TV. But somebody who has already learned how to make a TV, they will make it a lot faster. That is the only difference. But what takes you forward is actually your craft. If it not was the case, Subrata Mitra would have never been one of the best DOPs that the country has produced. Because he never went to a film school. All he did was to study filmmaking process. So yeah, film school is not a big deal, honestly. If you're good at your craft, if you really want to be there and do your thing, if you're studying, if you're into the filmmaking process, you're good to go. I'll just reach earlier at the finishing line. But then I can very well falter if my craft is not good enough, even after my film school. If my craft is not good enough, I just might falter at the finishing line and trip down and fall. And you will just come like the turtle behind me and you will win the race. So it is just about being the bunny, I guess. So not much of a difference. At the end of the day, mobile phone might be an amazing equipment. I have shot on mobile phone. So I know it. Every equipment has its pros and cons. You have to study it. You can very well shoot on a mobile phone, but you cannot, if you're just randomly turning it on and shooting na, then it makes no point. But to me, camera advantage key, disadvantage key, how to make the best of that. See, the machines should not ever dictate the human psyche or the human craft skill. You are the human, you are with the bigger brain, you have created the machine. You should be controlling it, not the other way around. So, if you really want to do great, তুমি ফোন নিয়ে যা ইচ্ছে শ্যুট করতে পারো, I really don't mind. But you have to study the mobile phone also. তোকে জানতে হবে যে মোবাইল ফোনের কতখানিও ব্রাইটনেস হ্যান্ডেল করতে পারে, কতখানিও ডার্কনেস হ্যান্ডেল করতে পারে, কোথায় আসলেও স্টেডি মুভমেন্ট হতে পারবে না, কোথায় গেলে আমি জিনিসটাকে ঠিক করে হ্যান্ডেল করতে পারবো. If you don't know the ABC, how are you going to communicate? Breaking grammar only happens once you know the grammar, right? You have to know the grammar, you have to know the rules to break it. You say that, আইডি কার্ড পড়বো না, I am breaking the rules, so amazing cool I am. But আইডি কার্ডের তো কোনো রুলই ছিল না এখানে. Then what rule are you breaking? So you can very well shoot anything that you want. And equipment today nowadays have become to facilitate filmmakings independently. But you have to know the equipment, bros. You just have to know it. Even if it's a GoPro, it's a mobile phone, it's a iPhone, I don't care what it is. But every equipment has its dynamics. It has its best, it has its worst. You have to know that. Once you know that, you will be able to shoot whatever you want to do. So my point is, because it's filmmaking, people think that it's very easy, it's just a cinema বানাচ্ছি. It is not that. Cinema is one of the most dynamic uh, processes ever in the world, because in audio it hits two of your senses at the same point of time, your eyes and your ears. And it is an amazingly dynamic scope to working. You have to know about technology, you have to know about aesthetics, you have to know science, you have to know human psyche, you have to understand how an image making process works, you have to know how your eye functions, you have to understand light. So you have to understand all of that, and then knowing all of that, you mix it together, and then you're bringing out an image. So mobile phone, I don't believe somebody who shoots on auto mode is a filmmaker. I am sorry. You cannot be shooting on auto mode and claim that you're a filmmaker. You have to understand how to handle an exposure when you're shooting in a scene where it is scorching sun but it's also raining and your character is standing in the shade. And you give me an image where I can see everything, I will trust you. And that has to be on your manual mode. You cannot shoot auto mode and claim to be a filmmaker. They do not demean the technology and the understanding and the craft to a level where the the machines decide what is my image or what is my visual poetics. When we were shooting Manohar, Manohar, it was shot extensively on the mobile phone. So I literally sat on the I had not shot on mobile phone before that. So I went back and I studied how a camera functions, how that certain mobile does. I saw its test footages, and I understood that how much of brightness can it hold, how much of darkness can it hold, and we shot accordingly. You have to study. It is a very serious vocation. Like you study to be a doctor, to be an engineer, to be an astrophysicist, you have to have the same amount of patience and seriousness to study filmmaking. You just cannot wake up one day and decide that I'm a director hobo or I'm a cameraman hobo. People are not stupid to have been studying about this for 100 years. Okay, we have 150 years of history, and there have been studies about why a certain cut works, why a certain shot works, why a certain image angle works, why a certain scripting works, and people have not been stupid to do that for 100 years. No, there must be a reason. So do not demean that evolution of understanding and human intelligence of 100 and 150 years, saying that আমি তো অটো মোডে শুট করলেই ভালো ছবি হয়. I would say it's Kanai. He's my personal favorite because of his work that and I also spoken about Saptapadi, because I think it is one of the finest films ever made in Bengali films per se, but it is also one of the finest camera works, because you doing something like that in commercial film today, people would say it is a groundbreaking work. Such shot so differently that film is, oh my god, it doesn't look like a commercial film at all. But this person had done this 50 years back with Ilan, and it went on to become one of the biggest commercial hits ever. And if you ever look into the work that he has done, if you've deconstructed the shots, they're poetry. We have not really seen back projection of that finesse in the longest time in Indian cinema. A Podjodina Shesha is a brilliant example of clinical precision in back projection. It is amazing. And you have to give it to him. He has been shooting silhouettes, he has been shooting backlights with a lot of loban and making it look dynamic at that point of time. He has had the guts to shoot Uttam Kumar in pitch dark with only a backlight. So Roger Dickens came a lot later. Okay, this person has been doing it, so you have to give it to him. And he has been fantastic. His visual poetry, and I think he should have got a lot more of recognition than what he has ever. Colourist is a DOP's best friend in present day scenario, especially because previously when we used to do this in analog, the control over post-production image wasn't too much, because you're only just playing in 3 channels and everything. So even the word cinematographer has also changed to director of photography, because there's so much of other variants and so much of other factors that have come into play in the image making process. And right now the colorist is the most important person, because I usually, what I do, I send my colorist the visuals the moment I start thinking about it. So I tell him ke this is my color palette, এটা আমি অ্যাচিভ করার চেষ্টা করছি, so this is going to be my things, and I'm sending you the color palette, and you please respond me back of what we can do. And if there is a scope, if there is a chance, I shoot a test shoot, and I look set before even I'm going on floor. So I need him to be, my lieutenant in some way, that even whatever I do, he will have the final images in place. And we shoot day for night and night for day, and we shoot different visuals and different this and that, everything. The colorist finally puts together all of that we have into a seamlessness, and creates that final package of the visual design that we had intended to do. So he's very much important, and is equally important to be in the cinematography team as my gaffer is, because ultimately when all of everything has come into place, he's the one who finally beats the whole images together into one seamless images. I work very cohesively with Devajyoti Ghosh. So me and Devu are always into a conversation of how I want my images to be, what am I trying to achieve. So this is the lighting pattern I'm going for, this is the camera I'm going for. Do you think that you will be able to handle the dynamics of this light pattern in this camera? And he would have his points. So it is great to know where my end product is going and how my end product is going to be handled. And the colorist knows his best, because he also needs to have that information in an image so as to play with. So I can also shoot rubbish and bring it to him and tell him ke theek kar de, or eta tu sajiye ne bhai, because he cannot do that. So he needs to trust me to bring the correct information to him, and I also need him to be on the same page with me, so he also pre-visualizes of the scales and everything that I am trying to hit. Else it becomes very difficult. So I think colorist, especially in today's digital filmmaking process, is one of the most important and the biggest trump cards that a DOP can have to have that end product just the way he or she wants. Not necessarily they need to be shot. Period films doesn't necessarily need to be shot on sepia or monochrome. But I'm a personal lover of monochromes. Okay, I always believe that the tones and the grayscale in a monochrome is magical, and no matter how much of color and everything you do, you Subrata Mitra had very famously said that the gray tones in a grayscale, or the tones in a grayscale, is almost like a melody. It is like saregama padhani. It's like the sargam. So they all amalgamate together to create a rag, to create a melody, to create a note and a musical tone. And I think it is so very important to understand that the grayscale of not of devoid any colors, just by the contrastual difference and the luminance difference, it creates that poetry, and it is so beautiful. But yes, having said that, previously it was all monochrome, and we have seen fantastic images. And if a monochrome is shot well, I always believe that the audience creates that color in their heads, in their own psyche. Even you don't show them color, you would always say সুচিত্রা সেন ওই সিনেমাটা না লাল শাড়ি পরেছিল, and you go back and realize it was a black and white, but somewhere in the back of your imagination you have already processed that color in your mind. And a good black and white does that to you. It makes you see that color when it is devoid of anything. But I don't necessarily feel that sepia or black and white is the only way of telling a period film. But yes, nowadays people are getting back into monochrome, which I think is a fantastic practice, especially for DOPs, because shooting black and white is one of the most difficult things to do. So in a way it is very good for DOPs, But it's a personal choice really, how you want to tell the story. If a certain director or DOP or combined, they want to see a story in a certain monochrome, they might. I don't know, it can not be just black and white, it can be just cyan and blue for that matter. It can be just monotone in any way whatsoever. But yes, it's an interesting way of telling a story, but I don't think absolutely necessary. And also I think that because nowadays color is so much around us, sometimes getting out of color and looking at a story gives us an insight more into the soul of the story, and where you're not distracted by anything else. So that is a good practice. But yeah, if people want to, they can. As long as it's well shot black and white, I really don't mind.